About 6 months after I got married, something big happened that shook up my life. My husband suddenly told me I had to take care of his dad, who was now stuck in bed because of an accident. This was all new to me, and I found it really hard. Then, out of the blue, my husband said, "Let's go chill in Hawaii while you handle my dad." So, off my husband and his mom went to Hawaii, leaving me to take care of his dad. They didn't realize the trouble their decision would cause down the road. My name is Mary, and I'm 30 years old. I've always loved cooking, so after finishing college, I got a job at a big restaurant chain. Now, I work in the planning department, coming up with new menu items. About 8 years into my job, I met Tom, who eventually became my husband. 2 years ago, I decided to go to my favorite Japanese pub alone. I sat at the counter, and next to me was Tom. We got talking and found out we were the same age. We hit it off and exchanged numbers. Tom started inviting me out to dinner often, and we began spending a lot of time together. He was funny and upbeat, and I found myself really liking him. It seemed like he felt the same, and we started dating. Eventually, we got married 6 months ago and now live together in an apartment conveniently located between our workplaces. Sometimes, I slack off on housework because we're both busy with our jobs, but Tom always reassures me with a smile, saying, "You don't have to be perfect at housework. I'm just happy to be with you." I replied, "I wish I could make fancier dinners, but I'm just happy to eat with you." Tom is always so kind, saying, "I treat the people I care about well. I'm so glad to be your husband." I feel the same way, saying, "Me too. I'm lucky to have you." Even after 6 months of marriage, we still have these sweet conversations. I thought our happy days would last forever, but suddenly, everything changed and our happiness disappeared. When I got home from work that day, my husband was already in the living room. Usually, one of us would say, "Hey," but this time, there was an uneasy silence. I nervously asked my husband what was wrong since he looked worried while scrolling through his phone. "Tom, are you okay?" I asked. He replied, "Hey Mary, I'm just really out of it. What's up? You seem scared." I explained, "Oh, it's just that my mom called from your mom's. Your dad was in an accident." I was caught off guard by his unexpected reaction. "What? I didn't expect that. Shouldn't we go see him?" Tom shook his head sadly, saying, "No, we can't." "Why not?" I asked, feeling anxious. "It's just not possible right now," he said. "Mom's taking care of him until he's better." "Oh no," I sighed, feeling helpless. His words made me realize there was nothing we could do at the moment. I let go of his hand and sat down on the sofa. I was worried about my father-in-law. He had just turned 65 and usually took good care of himself, enjoying activities like hiking and golfing on his days off. My husband works for my father-in-law's business, so I knew he must be feeling torn. Not only is he his boss, but he's also his dad. It was hard to imagine him being his usual cheerful self that day when he was clearly upset. A week later, we finally got to visit my father-in-law in the hospital. When I walked into his room, he had a weak smile on his face. "How are you feeling, Dad?" I asked, concerned. He scratched his head apologetically and said, "Mary, I'm sorry for worrying you." I reassured him, "Don't worry, I'm just glad you're safe." He nodded slowly, saying, "I'm okay, but I'll stay in bed for a while." Seeing him smile eased my worries. Unfortunately, the accident had left him with a spinal cord injury, and he was still paralyzed. He had to stay in a hospital for about 2 months for treatment and rehabilitation. Even after he was discharged, he would need ongoing therapy. While he was away, Tom decided to step in as president of his father's company. It felt strange to have my husband as the boss, even if only temporarily. As I was watching Tom and his father talk, my mother-in-law pulled me aside and sarcastically said, "Hey Mary, are you sure you're not confused about something?" "I'm not confused," I replied firmly. "Just because Tom is the president doesn't mean you can take advantage of him. Please don't do that." My mother-in-law shrugged and said, "I don't need to worry about that. I have a job and I'm well compensated." "Fine, but you knew Tom was the boss's son from the start." "What a nasty thing to say," I retorted, feeling frustrated. But it was all in her imagination. I didn't know Tom was the president's son until we had been dating for a while. Since the beginning of our marriage, my mother-in-law had been sarcastic toward me, and I didn't want to be misunderstood or disliked by her. So I spoke up. I didn't get with Tom for money. I was drawn to his personality. "What are you talking about? You act like you know everything about me," she shot back. Well, you won't be able to fool me. I'll never accept you. Never. My father-in-law, sensing tension, asked, "What's going on?" "Nothing," my mother-in-law snapped, giving me a harsh look. Her words and behavior showed that she favored Tom. She probably thought I married him for money because we tied the knot after only a year of dating. Her treatment of me had been harsh from the moment we met at the wedding. I never expected her to be so mean. Even more troubling was that my husband adored her. A few days later, he said something that bothered me. "Mary, you know that my dad will be discharged from a hospital next month, right? We'll be going back to my parents' place then," Tom said. "Wait, why are you bringing this up now all of a sudden?" I asked, feeling caught off guard. "It's my mom's suggestion. It's a good opportunity for us to live together. She can't take care of my dad alone," Tom explained. "But it's not that simple to make such a big decision so quickly. We need to think this through together," I replied. "I'm grateful for your consideration, Mom." I was confused, but he was firm, saying, "Well, that's the decision. Just make sure you pack your stuff in time for the move." "But I won't be able to get to work easily if we move to your parents' place." "We struggled to find an apartment close to our jobs," I protested. "It's only 5 train stops away from my parents' place, isn't it?" "You're lucky you can even sit on the train in the mornings," he replied. It seemed like my husband and mother-in-law had already made up their minds about living together. Despite my attempts to discuss avoiding it, they ignored me. My husband became even more devoted to my mother-in-law, and his treatment towards me got harsher. He started lecturing me every single day. "How's the packing going? I won't be able to take time off work on moving day, so you'll have to take care of everything. You'll be in charge of all the household chores and looking after my mom. Don't let her suffer," he'd say. Even before the move, I felt mentally overwhelmed by his comments. With the company being busy, I was already juggling work and preparing for the move. I was completely drained, both physically and mentally. 2 months later, the move was done, and my father-in-law came home from the hospital. I barely had time to catch my breath, but I started a new job as my father-in-law's caregiver. I woke up at 4 a.m. to make breakfast and do laundry simultaneously. Then I hurried to my father-in-law's room to give him a morning massage and help him change clothes. I had to finish breakfast before my husband and mother-in-law, and once they were done, I assisted my father-in-law with his meals. Finally, after everyone had eaten, I could head to work. Despite all my efforts with caregiving and housework, my mother-in-law was never satisfied. She always seemed to find a way to delay me from going to work in the mornings. "Mary, can you spare a minute?" she'd say. I'd apologize. "I really have to leave right now." "What's the problem now?" "Are you complaining about breakfast?" My mother-in-law's words hit me like a ton of bricks. "I'll talk to you about it when I get back. Now I'm leaving. Don't argue with me. Just stay put," she commanded. I felt a headache coming on as my mother-in-law continued to yell. My heart started racing, and I felt dizzy. Whenever my husband or mother-in-law started with their unreasonable demands, I would get heart palpitations and headaches. But arguing with them only made things worse. The quickest way to get through it was to stay quiet. Because of my mother-in-law's constant complaints, I was always running late for work. My coworkers started to notice, and they were worried because I had never been late before. 3 months had flown by since my father-in-law got out of the hospital, but I still felt like I was running on fumes. After a long day at work, I had to rush home and start cooking dinner, but even my efforts weren't enough to please my husband. "What's the matter, Mary? I come home tired, and you're serving fish? Are you serious?" he criticized. "I'm sorry. I had to step away to help my father-in-law, so I just made boiled fish," I explained. "You should make something that gives me energy. I'm not interested in boiled fish," he complained. As my husband started making himself some instant noodles, I fell silent, feeling defeated. My mother-in-law looked smug. Feeling down, I went to help my father-in-law get ready for the evening. He noticed my distress and asked, "Mary, you look a bit pale. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just a bit stressed with work," I replied. "Is that all?" "I've been hearing a lot of arguing between my wife and Tom lately," he said with concern. "It's my fault. I'm not very skilled at a lot of things," I admitted sadly. "I don't see it that way," I replied, forcing a smile and fibbing to my father-in-law. It was the only way I could keep myself going. The truth was, I had always wanted to leave, but what would happen to my father-in-law if I did? I couldn't just walk away from everything. As the end of the year approached, I had some days off from work, but I spent them cleaning the house. Then, on New Year's Eve, my husband dropped a bombshell. "My mom and I are heading to Hawaii," he announced. "Hawaii? But we've been talking about this for a while," my husband explained, sounding nonchalant. "Wait, just think about your dad's condition. He needs you here. Besides, you're off work, so we should do something together," I pleaded. They both had smug looks on their faces as they showed me their packed carry-on bags. It seemed like they found my confusion amusing as they struggled to contain their laughter. As they walked out the door, my husband casually said, "You'll take care of my dad while we're in Hawaii. We're going to relax, so you're on your own." They both laughed as the door closed behind them. In that moment, something inside me snapped. "What do you mean, take care of him? Why am I the one doing everything alone? I can't handle being treated like this as a family member. I'm divorcing him when they get back," I thought, feeling a surge of anger. Despite my decision to divorce, I resolved to focus on caring for my father-in-law until they returned. I decided to stop doing anything around the house. The next day, I made breakfast for my father-in-law as usual and went to his room with a towel to help him freshen up. As I was doing so, my father-in-law smiled at me. "Mary, Happy New Year," he greeted me. "Dad, Happy New Year to you too. What happened with Tom and my wife last night? They seem to be in some sort of trouble," I asked. "They went to Hawaii," he replied. "Hawaii? Really?" My father-in-law sighed deeply and looked skeptical. Dad, let's not dwell on that. I'm sorry for everything. But wait a second. What are your thoughts?" I apologized and then asked for his opinion. I've actually been able to get out of bed on my own for a few days now. I was waiting for the right moment, but I never expected it to happen like this, my father-in-law explained with a smile, speaking slowly. It turned out that my father-in-law had noticed how unfairly I was being treated. I had asked my mother-in-law and husband to help me with errands, but they had ignored me. Additionally, the company's executive director had contacted my father-in-law, reporting that my husband, who was acting as president, was not following proper procedures and was abusing company funds for this trip. So my father-in-law contacted a company representative to monitor my husband's behavior. They discovered that my husband had been slacking off at work, which angered everyone. My father-in-law was supposed to take back his position as president after the new year, but instead he decided to fire my husband. Since the house was in my father-in-law's name, while they were away, we changed the locks and made plans to keep them out when they returned. As I went to the city office to pick up 2 divorce papers, a week passed. Suddenly, I heard banging on the front door and the intercom ringing repeatedly. It was my husband and mother-in-law just back from Hawaii trying to get in. I responded to them through the intercom. "Welcome back. How was your trip?" I asked politely. "Mary, open the door right now. I can't open it," my husband demanded. "I can't do that. My father-in-law warned me not to let them in." "What? What are you talking about?" "Hey, did you enjoy your trip? You know that was company funds, right?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. I didn't know," my husband stammered, looking flustered. I couldn't help but chuckle as I watched their reactions on the monitor. Then my father-in-law, who had been listening in, chimed in from the side. "So you really use company money, son? Why, you're not even supposed to be able to walk," my father-in-law said incredulously. "I've been able to walk for a few days now, thanks to Mary helping with my rehabilitation. And the managing director told me about your shady behavior at work," my father-in-law explained. "Who's the managing director?" my husband asked, clearly caught off guard. "No, Dad, that's not true. You've been fired and you need to leave my office right now," my husband declared angrily. "Pack your things and get out." Through the monitor, my husband started to cry, pleading, "Mary, you won't leave me, will you?" He reached out to me. "What are you talking about? Do you have any idea how I've felt since you decided to move in with your parents without asking me? You, along with your mother, took advantage of me and forced me to take care of your father. Do you know how hard it's been for me?" I snapped back at him as he grabbed onto me. "Mary, calm down. I'm sorry," he apologized, tears streaming down his face. "Your apology means nothing to me. When you left on that trip, I realized it was pointless to continue this family with you. I'll be living on my own. I don't want someone like you," I told my husband firmly. He looked stunned as he backed away, and my mother-in-law rushed to support him. It was a heartbreaking scene between a mother and her son. Then my father-in-law stepped forward, holding the divorce papers I had received. He made them fill out the papers right then and there, and I escorted them out and locked the door. They pleaded with me to open the door, but my father-in-law remained silent. I haven't seen them since. Rumor has it that they're both unemployed and struggling to find a place to stay, sleeping in a comic book cafe and working odd jobs. It's a far cry from the life they were living before, but it's the consequence of their actions. After the divorce, my father-in-law told me, "I'll hire a housekeeper from now on, so you're free to go." I took him up on his offer and moved to a place near my work. Now I'm living a comfortable and fulfilling life. I'm incredibly grateful to my father-in-law for rescuing me, and I'm determined to repay him however I can.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look, "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day." Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. "So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, what's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike. What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.